All right, let's get started here. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
I paid $50 for that dress, not because I couldn't afford more, not because I didn't know what was appropriate. I bought it because it was simple, clean, and didn't ask for attention. Navy blue, knee length, no glitter, no drama. It fit, it worked, and it didn't try to impress anyone. That was enough for me. Apparently, that was my first mistake. Scarlett had booked the most expensive bridal boutique in the county for her fitting. Crystal chandeliers, white carpet that probably cost more than my first car, champagne and tall glasses that no one actually finished. Every sales associate moved like they were part of a luxury perfume commercial. And there I was, standing by the rack in my $50 dress. Amelia, Scarlett said, dragging my name out like it tasted bad. You couldn't at least try. I looked down at myself. It's a dress, she laughed. Loud, the kind of laugh meant for an audience. Julian's mother covered her mouth politely. Two bridesmaids stared at me like I had walked in wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit. It looks like you're here to fix the air conditioning, Scarlett added. Not attend a wedding fitting, I smiled. If the air conditioning breaks, I probably could. That didn't land well. Scarlett turned slowly in front of the mirror, wrapped in a half-finished ivory gown that cost more than my truck. This, she said, touching the lace, is what success looks like. She looked at me through the reflection. And that, she tilted her head toward my dress. That's what happens when you waste your life in logistics. Logistics. That was her favorite word for me. She said it the way some people say dead-end job. To her, I was the family embarrassment. The older sister who never posted glamorous vacation photos. The one who didn't marry rich. The one who worked with grease and boxes. She liked telling people I handled warehouse stuff. It made her feel elevated. I stepped closer to the rack of gowns, running my fingers lightly over a sleeve. Don't, Scarlett snapped. The sales associate froze mid-step. She doesn't need to touch those, Scarlett continued. Some of these are custom imports. I slowly withdrew my hand. I was just looking. Scarlett's eyes dropped to my shoes. With what? Those work boots? They were polished leather, but sure. Work boots. She leaned toward the sales associate. I'm serious. Please make sure she doesn't smudge anything. She works around engines. There's probably oil on her. The word oil hung in the air like I had walked in dripping from a garage. I could feel every eye in the room shift to me. My mother cleared her throat softly, not to defend me, just to reduce the tension. Amelia. She said gently, maybe just sit down, honey. Let your sister have her moment. There it was, let her have her moment. As if my existence threatened it, my father crossed his arms. You know how important this marriage is, he said. Julian's family has a reputation. Don't make things awkward. Don't make things awkward. By standing, in a dress. Scarlett stepped down from the pedestal and walked closer to me. She smelled like expensive perfume and victory. You've always been jealous, she said quietly. But not quietly enough. You couldn't build anything impressive on your own, so now you show up like this, trying to embarrass me. I almost laughed. Jealous? Of what? The diamond. The last name she was marrying into the country club membership she had already posted about twice, Scarlett, I said calmly. I'm here because you asked me to be. She folded her arms. I asked you because it would look weird if you weren't here. Not because I wanted commentary from the family failure. Family failure. That one was new. Julian shifted uncomfortably near the champagne table but didn't say a word. Of course he didn't. Scarlett raised her voice just enough. You've always been the embarrassment, Amelia. The one who never fit in. The one who smells like grease and calls it a career. There it was again. Grease. For the record, I didn't smell like grease, but I let her talk. Because people show you exactly who they are when they think you can't do anything about it. She turned back to the sales associate. If she touches one more gown, I want it noted. We're not paying for contamination. Contamination, that one impressed me. My father nodded once. Amelia, know your place. I felt that sentence land harder than the others. Know your place. My place. The funny thing about rank is that most people only recognize it when it's printed on a business card. I stepped back from the rack and took a seat on one of the white couches. The champagne flute beside me had fingerprints on it from someone else. I didn't touch it. Scarlett went back to admiring herself in the mirror, lifting the skirt dramatically. This is the life I deserve, she said. Not some backroom inventory nightmare. Inventory nightmare. I checked my watch. Then my phone vibrated. It wasn't a ringtone. It was a short-coded pattern. Scarlett rolled her eyes. Please tell me that's not one of your mechanic friends. I stood and stepped a few feet away, answering without looking at her. Vance. There was a brief pause. Then a calm voice. Status update required. Confirm phase alignment. I kept my tone even. Phase alignment verified. Delta channel secured. No civilian exposure. Behind me, Scarlett whispered loudly to one of her bridesmaids. See, I told you, she talks like that at work. It's like blue-collar Morse code. I ignored her. Proceeding under standard clearance, I continued. Awaiting green light pending, the voice replied. Maintain cover, understood. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my purse. Scarlett tilted her head. What was that, ordering brake pads? I met her eyes. No, I said. Just confirming delivery timelines, which wasn't a lie. She laughed again. You see, logistics, that's all you are, all I am. She lifted the gown once more, twirling slightly, and I sat there in my $50 dress while my family pretended I was something that needed to be managed, minimized, and kept away from anything valuable. They saw oil, they saw failure, they saw someone beneath them. What they didn't see was clearance level. What they didn't understand was that sometimes the quiet person in the corner isn't silent because she has nothing to say. She's silent because she's measuring. I looked around that luxury boutique, at the chandeliers, at the polished floors, at the future in-laws who thought I was a cautionary tale, and I let Scarlett keep laughing, because I knew something she didn't. Have you ever been the most powerful person in the room and still treated like you weren't allowed to touch the furniture? Tell me in the comments. I checked my credit alert before I even took off my shoes. The notification had come in while I was driving home from the boutique. Large balance increase. New line of credit. Unusual activity flagged. I don't panic over numbers. I work with numbers bigger than wedding budgets. But I don't ignore patterns either. I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into my banking portal. There it was. A new credit line under my name. Approved 2 weeks ago. Limit $250,000. Current balance $187,432. I leaned back in my chair. Scarlett's wedding venue alone probably ran 6 figures. The imported flowers, the rehearsal dinner at a private estate, the custom gown, the designer invitations she had posted online like trophies. I pulled up the application documents. Name Amelia Vance. Social security number mine. Date of birth mine. Employment status. Independent contractor, logistics. Income level dramatically inflated. Digital signature, a messy attempt at my name. She didn't even try to copy it properly. I zoomed in. The A in Amelia slanted the wrong direction. I never looped my V. Whoever signed this had practiced just enough to be confident and not enough to be correct. I checked the billing address. Scarlett's apartment. I closed my laptop slowly, then I reopened it. Because denial wastes time. I drove to my parents' house that evening without calling first. Scarlett was there, of course, sitting at the kitchen island with a wedding planner and a stack of glossy catalogs. She looked up when I walked in. Wow, she said. Did you come to apologize for breathing near my dress? I ignored that. We need to talk, I said. My mother stiffened. Not tonight, Amelia. Your sister is stressed. Scarlett waved a hand. No, let her talk. I love when she tries to sound important. I placed printed copies of the credit application on the counter. This is in my name, I said evenly. Scarlett glanced down. Then she smirked. Oh, so we were skipping denial. You used my social security number, I continued. You opened a $250,000 line of credit. You've already spent almost $200,000. My father stepped closer. What are you accusing her of? I'm not accusing, I said. I'm stating. Scarlett folded her arms. Relax. It's temporary. Temporary fraud is still fraud. She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. I looked at her. You forged my signature. She shrugged. Technically, it's just family borrowing. Family borrowing. I let that sit for a second. You didn't ask, I said. She leaned forward. You owe us. That caught my attention. Owe you what? Scarlett laughed lightly. Years. Years of what? Of living under this family's name and giving nothing back. I stared at her. I moved out at 18, I said. And you never helped with anything, she shot back. No wedding fund. No upgrades to the house. No connections. Nothing. You just disappear into your little logistics world and act superior. Superior? That was new. You make money, she continued. You just hide it. And you don't even have a real lifestyle. No kids, no husband, no social circle. What are you saving for? I kept my voice steady. That's not your decision. My mother finally spoke. Scarlett is building something respectable, she said softly. This marriage matters. It elevates all of us. Elevates. So stealing my identity elevates you? I asked. Scarlett didn't flinch. It's not stealing if we're going to pay it back. With what? She hesitated half a second. With wedding gifts, with future earnings. Julian's family has resources. There it was, not a plan, a fantasy. I tapped the paperwork. This is criminal. My father's jaw tightened. Careful with what? With the words you use. I looked at him. She committed fraud. He exhaled sharply. She's your sister, and I'm your daughter. Silence. Scarlett's smile faded slightly, but only slightly. You're overreacting, she said. You've lived off this family's goodwill for years. That sentence was so detached from reality, I almost admired it. I paid for my own education, I said. I bought my own truck. I pay my own bills. You still carry the Vance name, she snapped. That has value. I almost laughed. If she only knew how much. My mother stepped between us. We are not letting you sabotage this wedding over paperwork. Paperwork. That paperwork is a felony, I said calmly. Scarlett leaned back on her stool. Fine, then call the police. She said it like a dare, like she knew I wouldn't. You won't, she added, because then everyone will know your sister is a criminal, and that would ruin the wedding. She tilted her head. And you wouldn't do that. You're too obsessed with discipline. She wasn't wrong about discipline. She just misunderstood who it served. My father cleared his throat. This house, he said slowly, needs unity right now. I knew that tone. He wasn't done. You still have the cabin, he continued. The one your grandfather left you. I felt something shift. Yes, I said carefully. He nodded once. We've been discussing it. We. Scarlett and Julian could use it as a wedding gift. It's small, but the land has appreciated. It would be a meaningful start for them. I stared at him. That house is legally mine. My mother's voice hardened. You don't deserve it more than your sister. There it was, she's building a family, my father said. You're working? So you're going to take it, I asked. It's in the family, he replied. We can transfer it properly. Don't make this ugly. Don't make this ugly. I looked around the kitchen I grew up in. Same tile floor, same clock on the wall, different people. Scarlett crossed her legs and smiled at me. See, problem solved. Solved. She had stolen my identity, racked up 6 figures in debt. And now my parents were offering her my inheritance as a bonus, and they thought I was the problem. I gathered the papers calmly. You're not angry? Scarlett asked, almost disappointed. No, I said, because anger is loud. And I don't work loud. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled out my phone. First, I took high-resolution photos of every page, close-ups of the forged signature, the IP address listed on the application, the billing address tied to Scarlett's apartment. Then I opened a secure contact line. The number wasn't saved under a name. It didn't need to be. When the call connected, I spoke evenly. I need legal containment on a domestic fraud case, I said. High priority, sensitive exposure risk. There was a pause. Understood, the voice replied. Civilian, for now. Evidence collected. Proceed not yet, I said. I want monitoring in place first. Copy that. I ended the call. Through the windshield, I could see the kitchen light still on, Scarlett laughing, my parents hovering. They thought I was cornered. They thought I had nowhere to go. They thought I needed their approval. I started the engine. They had just committed a crime using the wrong name, and they had no idea who that name actually belonged to. I unlocked the glass cabinet and took the uniform out with both hands. It hung exactly where I had left it months ago, pressed, medals aligned, not for display. For memory, I don't keep many sentimental things. That uniform is one of them. Officially, I work in logistics. Unofficially, I oversee special operations supply integrity for a classified task force. My job is to find where money leaks, where equipment disappears, where someone decides profit matters more than soldiers. Rank general, age younger than most people expect. Visibility, almost none. You don't put someone like me on a billboard. You bury them in spreadsheets and let them follow the money until it leads somewhere uncomfortable. 3 months ago, it led to a private defense subcontractor with irregular shipment patterns. 2 months ago, it led to a shell company routing surplus equipment into civilian resale markets. 1 month ago, it led to a financial name attached to procurement approvals. Julian Mercer. The same Julian who now practiced wedding vows in my parents' living room. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Mercer is not a rare last name. Then I saw his photo attached to internal documentation. Same face, same careful smile. He wasn't the mastermind. He wasn't that smart. But he was positioned perfectly between approval signatures and vendor contracts. A connector. A clean public image shielding dirty paperwork. And now he was marrying my sister. I put the uniform back inside the cabinet and locked it. My cover worked because it was boring. Logistics manager, supply chain consultant, the kind of job no one asked questions about. Scarlett never cared what I did as long as it sounded unimpressive. That weekend, my parents hosted a pre-wedding dinner. Julian was there, charming as ever, shaking hands like he was running for office. I watched him from across the room. He avoided eye contact with me. Interesting. Scarlett had insisted I come. Try to look normal, she texted. I wore jeans and a plain blouse. She scanned me when I walked in. Better, she said. At least you don't look like you just changed brake pads. Julian approached with a glass of red wine. Amelia, he said smoothly. Good to see you again. Likewise, I replied. He held my gaze a fraction too long. He knew something felt off. Maybe not what, but enough. Dinner moved into the living room. My parents showed off wedding photos on the TV. Scarlett kept mentioning the venue. Military estate, she said proudly. Private grounds, very selective guest list. Of course it was. Scarlett drifted toward the hallway at some point, pretending to show a bridesmaid the house. My mother followed. I didn't think much of it. Until I heard the sound, glass opening, then a short laugh. I stood and walked down the hallway. My bedroom door was open. Scarlett stood in front of my glass cabinet. The uniform was out. She held it up like a costume she found in a thrift store. What is this? She said loudly as I stepped in. My mother stood beside her. That's mine, I said calmly. Scarlett examined the medals. You really went all in on this fantasy, huh? It's not a fantasy, she smirked. Did you buy this online because it looks expensive for a hobby? My mother frowned at the jacket. Amelia, what is this? My uniform, Scarlett laughed. Her uniform, right. Julian appeared behind them holding his wine glass. His expression changed instantly. He recognized it. He didn't speak. Scarlett turned slightly and lifted her glass in one hand, still holding the jacket in the other. You know what this looks like, she said. Cheap cosplay. Before I could move, she tipped the wine. Red liquid spread across the front of the jacket. It happened in less than a second. The stain hit the fabric just below the medals. The room went silent. My mother gasped softly, not at Scarlett. At the potential mess on the carpet. Scarlett, she said. Be careful. Scarlett burst into laughter. Oh no, she said sarcastically. Did I ruin the costume? Julian set his glass down slowly. He wasn't smiling anymore. I stepped forward and took the jacket from her hands. The wine was soaking in. That uniform had been worn in places she would never survive for 5 minutes. And now it was dripping Merlot onto my bedroom floor. My mother grabbed a towel from the bathroom. Quick, blot it, she said to Scarlett. Scarlett pressed the towel lightly, still giggling. Relax, it's just fabric, just fabric. I looked at my mother. She didn't look at me. Amelia, she said quietly. If you're going to bring dramatic props into the house, don't act shocked when accidents happen. Dramatic props. I stood there holding my stained jacket while my sister dabbed at it, like she had spilled juice on a napkin. Julian shifted his weight. He opened his mouth slightly, then closed it. He understood what that uniform meant. He understood rank. He also understood exposure. Scarlett tossed the towel back into the sink. Honestly, she said, if you want to impress people, at least make it believable. She leaned closer to me. No one is buying that you're anything important. My mother sighed. Scarlett, enough. But she didn't correct her. She turned to me instead. Amelia. If this is going to cause tension before the wedding, maybe you should just go home. There it was. Not Scarlett, me. Don't ruin the atmosphere, my mother added. Atmosphere. I looked down at the wine spreading through the fabric. My hands were steady. That's something people misunderstand about discipline. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about choosing when it becomes useful. Scarlett folded her arms again. If you're upset, she said sweetly, you can always skip the wedding. No one's forcing you. Julian finally spoke. Scarlett, maybe. She cut him off. What, you defending the mechanic now? He went quiet. I hung the jacket over the back of a chair. I'll handle it, I said. Scarlett rolled her eyes. With what fabric glue? I looked at her. No, I said evenly, with proper procedure. She laughed again. My mother pointed toward the hallway. Amelia, just go if you're going to stand there looking offended. Looking offended. I wasn't offended. I was calculating. Julian watched me as I picked up the uniform carefully. For a brief second, fear crossed his face. He had seen the medals up close. He had seen the insignia. He knew they weren't decorative. I walked past them without raising my voice. As I reached the door, Scarlett called out one more time. Next time, at least pick a better costume. I didn't answer, because she had just poured red wine on the only visible proof of who I actually was. And she still believed I was the least powerful person in that house. I was rinsing red wine out of the fabric when the knock hit the front door. Not a casual knock. 3 sharp, evenly spaced strikes. Professional. I stepped out of the laundry room and dried my hands on a towel. My parents were in the living room. Scarlett was scrolling through wedding decor ideas on her phone like nothing in the world required urgency. The knock came again. Scarlett groaned. If that's another vendor asking for deposits, tell them to email. My father walked to the door and opened it halfway. He froze. I didn't need to see it to know. Boots on pavement, engine idling, the faint sound of doors closing in sync. I stepped into the hallway. 2 uniformed service members stood on the porch. Formal posture, no small talk. One of them spoke. We're looking for Vance. Scarlett pushed past my father before he could respond. That's me, she said instantly. Of course it was. The soldier glanced down at a tablet in his hand. Full name, he asked. Scarlett Vance, she replied confidently. Well, technically soon to be Mercer, but yes. The soldier didn't smile. Amelia Vance, he clarified. Scarlett hesitated for half a second. Yes, she said anyway. That's my full name. It wasn't. I stepped forward, but stayed inside the hallway, just out of their direct line of sight. The second service member held a sealed package. Thick envelope, official markings, urgent delivery, he said. Signature required. Scarlett grabbed the clipboard before my father could speak. I'll sign, she said. She scribbled something messy across the digital pad. The soldier studied her for a second too long. Understood, he said, finally handing her the envelope. They didn't salute. They didn't linger. They turned and walked back to the vehicle without another word. Scarlett shut the door and held up the package like she had just won a prize. What did you order? She called out loudly toward me. New spark plugs. I stepped into the living room. That's not yours, I said calmly. She rolled her eyes. Relax, it says Vance. That's us. She flipped the envelope over. Official seal, department insignia. Her smile faded slightly. Why would they send you anything? She muttered. Open it, my father said. Scarlett slid her finger under the seal and tore it open carelessly. Several items slid halfway out. A velvet case, a folded document stamped in red. She blinked. What is this? She said. She opened the velvet case. Inside was a medal, not decorative, not fake, not subtle. Her expression shifted from confusion to irritation. Oh my God, she laughed. You actually ordered medals online. I stepped closer. Give it to me, I said. She pulled it back. My mother leaned in. Amelia, what is this about? Scarlett flipped open the folded document. She scanned the first few lines. Then her face tightened. This looks official, she said quietly. I didn't reach for it. I waited. My father took the document from her hands. He read silently, his face drained of color. What is this? He asked. It's addressed to me, I said evenly. Scarlett shook her head. No. It says, General Amelia Vance. She laughed nervously. Is this a joke? No one else was laughing. I stepped forward and took the papers from my father's hands. High-level summons. Immediate reporting instructions. Reference code tied to active investigation. And the medal. Honor commendation approval. Signed by the commanding authority overseeing my task force. I already knew that signature. Silas Harrison. The name hit harder now. Silas Harrison wasn't just any officer. He was the father of the man about to marry my sister, Admiral Silas Harrison, Julian's father. Years ago, before he became an admiral, he was deployed overseas in a volatile region where supply routes kept getting compromised. I was younger then, not yet at my current rank. still moving fast through assignments most people twice my age couldn't handle. We were ambushed during a convoy reroute. Improvised explosives, faulty intel. He was pinned behind a disabled vehicle while rounds hit metal inches from his position. I coordinated extraction under fire and physically pulled him clear when his leg got trapped under debris. He never forgot that. I never brought it up. The commendation inside that envelope wasn't about one moment. It was about years of operational integrity. And now that same man was hosting a wedding for his son inside a military estate. My sister's wedding. Scarlett stared at me. This is ridiculous, she said. General, you... She looked at my parents for backup. They didn't answer. My mother finally spoke, her voice tight. Amelia, explain. I held the document steady. I don't discuss my work, I said. Scarlett snorted. Because there is no work. She walked to the kitchen trash can and tossed the velvet case inside. The metal landed against coffee grounds and paper towels. There, she said. Problem solved. The room went silent again. I walked past her, opened the trash lid, reached in without hesitation. Scarlett stepped back slightly. I pulled the case out, wiped it clean with a napkin, and closed it. Then I folded the summons letter carefully. You're insane, she said. No, I replied calmly. You're careless, she pointed at me. You're not a general, you're barely employed. My father swallowed. Amelia, is this real? I looked at him. Yes, he stared at the insignia on the metal, then at the document, then at me. Scarlett shook her head violently. This is some elaborate stunt. You're trying to intimidate us before the wedding. I don't need to intimidate anyone, I said. She folded her arms. Julian's father is an admiral. We know real rank. So did I. I slipped the medal back into the case. Scarlett's voice rose slightly. If this was real, why would they deliver it here? Because this is my registered permanent address, I answered. That shut her up for half a second. My mother stepped closer. Why didn't you tell us? Because it wasn't relevant, I said. Scarlett laughed again, but it sounded forced. It's very relevant if you're pretending to outrank my future father-in-law. I held her gaze. I'm not pretending. Silence. Scarlett's jaw tightened. You're not going to show up to my wedding and embarrass us with this fantasy, she said. I picked up my phone and checked the timestamp on the summons. Immediate presence requested within 48 hours, which meant coordination was accelerating, which meant Julian's file had likely moved up the chain. Scarlett stepped closer, lowering her voice. If you think you can ruin this for me, I'm not ruining anything, I said. You're doing that on your own. She scoffed. You really think anyone important is going to salute you? I didn't answer, because I already knew the answer to that. And so did the man who signed that document. The same man who would be standing at the front of that estate in a few days, waiting for his son to get married. I authorized the freeze at 0700 sharp. No drama, no raised voice. Just procedure. I sat at my desk with 3 screens open. One showed the fraudulent credit account. One showed transaction logs. The third showed a secure line waiting for confirmation. Trigger civilian financial containment, I said calmly. Scope, the voice on the other end asked. All accounts opened under my identity. Within the last 60 days. Full audit, immediate suspension, collateral impact. Acceptable. There was a pause. Confirmed. Locks initiating. I watched the activity status change in real time. Card 1 restricted. Card 2 frozen. Supplementary digital wallet disabled. Luxury vendor credit extension under investigation. Scarlett had been spending like the money would regenerate overnight. Deposits for floral designers, custom rehearsal dinner menu, imported champagne, a $10,000 dinner reservation for the night before the wedding. That one caught my attention. I leaned back slightly. Perfect. The rehearsal dinner was being held at a private restaurant downtown. Exclusive. Prepaid minimum spend. Scarlett had bragged about it for weeks. If you're going to marry into prestige, she had said, you have to look like you belong. Belong, by the time I closed my laptop, the wall was already built. She just hadn't walked into it yet. That evening I arrived at the restaurant exactly on time. Simple black dress, hair pulled back, no effort to impress anyone. The host greeted Scarlett like royalty. Ms. Vance, he said with a polished smile, your private room is ready. She squeezed Julian's arm. See standards. Julian glanced at me once briefly. He looked tired. The private dining room was filled with soft lighting and overconfident conversation. Julian's extended family, a few officers, Friends who liked posting photos of wine glasses more than drinking from them. Scarlett took the head of the table. I sat near the end. Menus were decorative. The meal had already been selected, curated, she called it. Scarlett stood and raised her glass halfway through the second course. To legacy, she said proudly, to new beginnings, and to finally stepping into the world we deserve. Her eyes flicked toward me on that last sentence. I sipped water. The bill was prearranged for automatic processing at the end of service. Scarlett had made sure everyone knew she had it covered. Around 9:30 p.m., the restaurant manager entered quietly and approached Scarlett. He bent down slightly to speak. Her smile faltered. He whispered again. She laughed too loudly. That's impossible. He handed her a small device. She stared at it. Then she stood abruptly. I'll be right back, she announced, grabbing her purse. Julian followed her out into the hallway. I remained seated. 3 minutes later, I heard her voice from outside the room. What do you mean, decline, she snapped. Another pause. Run it again. Silence. I don't care what it says. Run it again. A longer silence. The manager's voice stayed calm. I'm sorry, ma'am. The account is restricted. Restricted. That word travels. Scarlett stormed back into the dining room, face flushed. There's a technical issue, she said tightly. Amelia, did you touch anything? Every head turned toward me. I blinked slowly. Touch what? She stepped closer. My card. Your card. The one under your name, she hissed quietly. There it was. Public enough to hear. Quiet enough to pretend it wasn't. Julian's father wasn't there yet. He was arriving for the wedding tomorrow. Tonight was Scarlett's stage, and the stage lights had just flickered. Scarlett leaned over me. Fix it? I don't have access to your wallet, I replied calmly. Her voice rose. Stop pretending. My father stood from his chair. Scarlett, lower your voice. She ignored him. You froze it, didn't you? She demanded. I looked at her steadily. You opened a $250,000 credit line in my name, I said evenly. What did you think would happen? Gasps. Soft but audible. Julian's mother stiffened. Scarlett's face changed instantly, rage replacing panic. You're jealous, she snapped. You can't stand that I'm marrying up. Marrying up, I'm protecting my identity, I replied. She leaned closer. You owe this family, she said through clenched teeth. You've lived off our name your whole life. I almost smiled. The manager hovered awkwardly near the door. Ma'am, he said carefully. We do require payment this evening. Scarlett's breathing became sharp. She turned back to me. You did this on purpose. Yes, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. The room went silent. Julian finally spoke. Scarlett, maybe we should? Before he could finish, she turned and slapped me, hard. The sound cracked through the room. My head tilted slightly from the impact. I tasted blood immediately. Someone gasped. Julian grabbed her arm. What are you doing? She pulled away. She's sabotaging my wedding because she's a failure. Failure. I placed my napkin calmly on the table. Stood up slowly. The room felt smaller now. All eyes on me. I touched my lip. Blood. Scarlett was breathing heavily like she had just won something. You think you can embarrass me, she said loudly. You think because you have some fake paperwork you can ruin this. I looked at her, then at the table, then back at her. No, I said quietly. I picked up a clean napkin from the sideboard and pressed it to my lip. I froze the accounts because they're mine, I continued evenly. And tonight is the last time you spend my money. Her face drained of color. Julian stepped back slightly. My father looked like he had swallowed something sharp. The manager cleared his throat. We can split the payment across multiple methods if necessary. Scarlett stared at me like I had just dismantled her entire future. You're disgusting, she said. No, I replied calmly. I'm done. There's a difference. I reached into my purse and placed my personal card on the table. For my meal only, I told the manager. Not the room, not the $10,000. Just my plate. Scarlett's breathing became uneven. You're going to humiliate me over money, I met her eyes. You already humiliated yourself. Julian ran a hand through his hair. This isn't helping, he muttered. Helping. Interesting word choice. Scarlett looked around at the guests, then back at me. Her voice dropped into something colder. This isn't over, I believed her, because she still thought this was about pride. It wasn't. It was about evidence. And walls don't fall because someone screams at them. They hold. Tomorrow she would walk down an aisle believing she still controlled the narrative. and tomorrow the rest of it would start moving into place. I arrived 10 minutes before the ceremony started. The estate was exactly what Scarlett had bragged about. Wide stone driveway, perfectly trimmed hedges, security at the gate checking names against a printed list, flags positioned with mathematical precision along the entrance, military property, maintained properly. I stepped out of my truck wearing the same simple navy blue dress she had mocked. Pressed, clean, no jewelry except a watch. The guard at the entrance checked my ID. He paused for a fraction of a second when he saw my last name. Then he handed it back without comment. Inside the courtyard was full of people who dressed like they understood legacy. Tailored suits, polished shoes, quiet conversations about postings and portfolios. Scarlett stood near the front of the aisle, radiant and rehearsed. Ivory gown, perfect makeup. Smiling for photos. She saw me. Her smile tightened just slightly. Good. An usher approached me with a polite but distant expression. Name Amelia Vance. He scanned the list. Another pause. I'm sorry, he said carefully. Family section is full. I glanced toward the front rows. There were 2 empty seats beside my parents. I'll sit there, I said. He shifted uncomfortably. Those are reserved. For family, I replied. He cleared his throat. You've been placed in general seating. Last row, right side. Placed. I looked at him steadily. By whom? Instructions were provided by the bride. Of course they were. That's fine, I said. He seemed relieved I wasn't arguing. I walked down the aisle, not toward the front, but all the way to the back. The last row. Folding chairs slightly less polished than the rest. A few distant relatives. A couple of vendors. Someone's +1 scrolling on their phone. Perfect. As I passed my parents, my mother avoided eye contact. My father pretended to adjust his cufflinks. 2 guests approached them immediately after. Are you Scarlett's parents? One woman asked. My mother smiled brightly. Yes, we're so proud. She's our only daughter. Only daughter. The word didn't echo. It settled. My father nodded. She's always been ambitious. Ambitious. I kept walking. I took my seat in the last row without reacting. From the back, you see everything differently. You see the backs of heads instead of faces. You see who leans in to whisper. You see who checks their phone when they think no one notices. And you see security placement. There were plainclothes officers positioned at 3 entry points, not local, military police. They blended well, but I recognized posture. Julian stood at the front beside the officiant. Black tux, controlled expression, but he wasn't steady. He kept glancing toward the side entrance, waiting. Scarlett adjusted her bouquet and whispered something to a bridesmaid, probably about me. Good, let her think that's the main threat. I crossed my legs and placed my purse on the empty seat beside me. Then I pulled out my tablet. Small, standard, looks harmless. I opened a secure app. 3 live feeds appeared. Feed 1 service corridor behind the main hall. Feed 2 catering entrance. Feed 3 private staging room where Julian had been preparing earlier. Audio was muted, but visuals were enough. 2 military investigators were already inside the restricted wing of the estate. Warrant signed. Authorization cleared. Timing synchronized with ceremony start to avoid public disruption until necessary. Julian shifted again at the altar. He knew something. Scarlett finally began her walk down the aisle. Music started. Everyone stood. I stayed seated. No one noticed. From the back, I watched her glide forward like she had already won. She passed my parents. My mother dabbed her eyes dramatically. My father stood tall, no acknowledgement of me. Just their only daughter. Scarlett reached Julian and took his hands. The officiant began speaking about unity and honor. Interesting word choice. On my tablet, one of the investigators reached the staging room door. Knocked once, entered. Julian's face changed almost instantly. Scarlett didn't notice at first. She was too focused on her moment. The officiant asked if anyone objected. No one spoke. I didn't need to. This wasn't about interrupting a ceremony. It was about timing. Julian's breathing became visible from where I sat. Scarlett squeezed his hand, thinking it was nerves. On the screen, one investigator presented paperwork. Julian looked at it, then at the officer, then back at the paper. His jaw tightened. He nodded slightly. Composure. He was trying to hold it together. Scarlett smiled at the audience, unaware. I adjusted the angle of my tablet to reduce glare. From the front row, my parents looked proud. From the last row, I could see the officers positioning themselves near the main doors. The officiant asked Julian to repeat his vows. His voice wavered. Scarlett laughed lightly, assuming emotion. On the screen, handcuffs were visible, not applied yet. Protocol required final confirmation. Julian glanced toward the back of the hall. His eyes met mine. Just for a second. He understood now. Not everything, but enough. Scarlett followed his gaze and finally noticed me sitting in the last row. Alone, calm, not reacting. She smirked slightly, misreading the situation. She still believed seating defined importance. My tablet buzzed once. Final authorization. I tapped the confirmation icon. From the side entrance, 2 uniformed military police stepped inside the hall. Not aggressively, just present. The air shifted. Guests noticed. Whispers began. Scarlett squeezed Julian's hands again. "What's wrong?" she whispered, barely audible. He didn't answer. The officiant paused mid-sentence. My father turned slightly in his seat. Confusion spreading. I remained seated in the last row, invisible, watching. Because sometimes the most powerful position in the room isn't the front. It's the one where you can see the entire board. I kept my hands folded on my lap, as the officiant asked if anyone objected. Silence filled the courtyard. It wasn't dramatic silence. It wasn't movie silence. It was polite, expectant silence. The kind people use when they're sure nothing will interrupt a perfectly planned life. I now ask, the officiant said clearly. If anyone here has cause to object to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. My name did not move toward my throat. I didn't stand. I didn't clear my voice. I stayed seated in the last row. Scarlett's chin lifted slightly. She glanced back just to check. She expected me to do something dramatic, to stand up and yell, to make myself look small. I didn't. Julian, however, stopped breathing normally. From where I sat, I could see the change in his shoulders, tight, rigid. He wasn't looking at Scarlett anymore. He was looking past her, toward the main entrance. 2 military police officers stood just inside the archway, not drawing attention, not speaking, just visible enough. Julian swallowed. The officiant waited. Scarlett squeezed his hand and whispered something with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Relax," she mouthed. He nodded stiffly. The officiant moved on. "Julian, do you take—" Julian's voice cracked before he even reached the first word. He stopped. Scarlett laughed softly into the microphone. "Nerves," she said to the guests. "He's emotional." Polite laughter followed. Julian glanced back again. This time one of the officers met his eyes. Not aggressive, just present. Julian's fingers trembled. Scarlett felt it. She tightened her grip and whispered, "What is wrong with you?" The officiant cleared his throat, trying to recover the rhythm. "Julian," he repeated. "Do you take Scarlett? I need a second," Julian said suddenly. That wasn't part of the script. A ripple moved through the crowd. Scarlett's smile froze. "What are you doing?" she hissed quietly. Julian stepped slightly away from her. His father was seated in the second row, posture straight, expression unreadable. Admiral Silas Harrison had arrived quietly before the ceremony began. No dramatic entrance, no announcement. He hadn't acknowledged me. He hadn't needed to. He was watching his son carefully. Julian's gaze drifted again to the officers. They hadn't moved, but their presence was heavy. Scarlett followed his line of sight. She saw them. Her smile faltered. "Why are there military police here?" she whispered. Julian didn't answer. The officiant tried again. "Shall we continue?" Julian inhaled sharply. He started again. Nothing came out. Scarlett's face flushed. She turned slowly toward the audience. Her eyes landed on me in the last row. Of course they did. She needed a target. Her voice shifted from sweet to sharp in seconds. "Look at her," she said, suddenly loud enough for the microphone to catch it. Every head turned. I didn't move. "She's sitting back there like she belongs here," Scarlett continued. "Like she understands this world." Murmurs began. Julian's father did not move. Scarlett pointed slightly in my direction. "This is what happens when you let people who've never achieved anything pretend they're equal." My mother shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. My father stared straight ahead. Scarlett's voice grew stronger with every word. "She thinks because she plays dress-up with fake medals she can walk into places like this." The guests exchanged confused looks. Scarlett's smile twisted. "Look at you," she said directly at me. This is a world you will never step into with those grease-covered hands. There it was, the final insult. Public, clear, designed to reduce me. The crowd waited. They expected me to react, to defend myself, to stand up and argue. I didn't. I stayed seated, hands still folded, expression neutral. Julian was no longer listening to Scarlett. He was staring at the officers again. One of them took a single step forward. Not enough to alarm the guests. Enough for Julian to understand timing. Scarlett mistook his fear for embarrassment. She laughed into the microphone. You see, this is what success looks like. Not hiding in warehouses. Warehouse. Interesting how consistent her imagination was. Silence followed her statement. Not applause, not agreement, just quiet. Because even people who don't know the truth can sense when something doesn't fit. Julian's breathing became uneven. He looked toward his father. Admiral Harrison's jaw tightened slightly. He didn't look at Scarlett. He looked at his son. Scarlett stepped closer to Julian, lowering her voice, but still audible through the mic. If you're freaking out because of her, don't, she said. She can't touch us. Can't touch us. Julian closed his eyes briefly. On my tablet, the authorization status changed from pending to active. I didn't look down. I didn't need to. I could feel the shift. Scarlett lifted her chin again and addressed the guests. Sorry for the interruption, she said brightly. Some people just don't know how to stay in their lane. Her eyes locked on mine one more time, especially when that lane involves motor oil. Light laughter from a few distant relatives who didn't understand the context. I stood up slowly, not abruptly, not dramatically. Just enough to be seen. Scarlett's smile widened, expecting confrontation. I didn't speak. I didn't raise my hand. I simply stood and waited. Because storms don't announce themselves by shouting. They change the air first. Julian felt it. His shoulders sagged slightly. One of the officers stepped fully into the aisle now. Scarlett turned, irritation flashing across her face. What is this? She demanded quietly. The officer didn't answer her. He looked at Julian. Sir, he said firmly but respectfully. The word cut through the ceremony like a blade. The guests went completely silent. Scarlett's smile finally broke, and for the first time since this entire performance began, she realized she might not be the one controlling the room. I stayed on my feet as the officer addressed Julian. Sir, he repeated, calm and controlled. We need a word. Scarlett turned fully toward him. Excuse me, this is a wedding. The officer didn't look at her. Julian's voice came out thin. Can this wait? No, sir, the officer replied. It cannot. The guests were no longer whispering. They were staring. My mother half rose from her seat, confused. My father's face had lost all color. Scarlett grabbed Julian's arm. What is happening? Before anyone could answer, another movement at the entrance shifted the energy completely. Every officer in the aisle straightened. Not subtly, automatically. A figure stepped through the archway. Dress uniform. Decorations aligned. Authority carried without effort. Admiral Silas Harrison. He had not been seated when the ceremony began. He had arrived moments ago quietly through a side entrance. Now he walked forward with measured steps. Scarlett exhaled in relief. Oh, thank God, she whispered. His father will handle this. Julian looked anything but relieved. The Admiral did not look at his son. He did not look at Scarlett. His eyes moved once across the room, scanning, measuring. Then they locked onto the last row. On me. He changed direction without hesitation. The officers in the aisle stepped aside instinctively. Guests turned in their chairs to follow him. Scarlett frowned, confused. Dad, Julian called softly. No response. Admiral Harrison walked the full length of the aisle, past the first row, past my parents, past the polished shoes and stunned faces. He stopped directly in front of me. For a brief second, the entire courtyard was silent. No music. No whispers, just the sound of wind moving across open stone. He looked at me, not surprised, not amused, respectful. Then he stepped back half a pace, brought his heels together, spine straight, right hand raised sharply to his brow in a precise military salute. General Vance, ma'am, he said clearly. I didn't know you were back from the mission. The words didn't echo, they landed, hard. Scarlett's bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the ground. White flowers against stone. Julian went pale. My mother made a small sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a cry. My father stood completely still like someone had unplugged him. Every officer present snapped into attention immediately, including the 2 military police near the aisle. The guests didn't fully understand what they were seeing, but they understood enough. A ranking admiral does not salute lightly, especially not at his own son's wedding. I returned the salute calmly. Admiral, I replied evenly. I lowered my hand first as protocol required. He followed. Scarlett looked from him to me and back again. This is insane, she whispered. This is a joke. No one laughed. Julian's breathing became shallow. Dad, he tried again, voice cracking. What is going on? Admiral Harrison didn't look at him immediately. He kept his eyes on me. Status, he asked quietly. Operational, I said. Containment in progress. He gave a single nod. Then he finally turned toward his son. Julian stepped back instinctively. Scarlett grabbed his arm again. Can someone explain why my future father-in-law is saluting my sister? No one answered her. My mother stood up slowly. Amelia, she said faintly. What is this? I looked at her without anger. This is my job. My father shook his head slightly. No, that's not possible. Scarlett's voice rose sharply. She works in logistics. A faint murmur passed through the officers near the entrance. Admiral Harrison's expression did not change. General Vance oversees Special Operations Supply Integrity, he said calmly, addressing no one in particular. Her authority exceeds mine in this matter. Exceeds mine. The phrase moved through the crowd like a shockwave. Scarlett's lips parted, but no words came out. Julian looked like he might collapse. My mother stared at me as if I had turned into someone else. General, my father repeated quietly. Yes, I said. Scarlett laughed once sharp and hollow. You expect us to believe that Admiral Harrison turned his gaze to her for the first time. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't loud, it was final. Belief is not required, he said. The military police stepped forward again. Julian Mercer, one of them, said formally, You are being placed under investigation for procurement fraud and misuse of federal resources. Gasps, now real ones. Scarlett's grip tightened on Julian's sleeve. This is a misunderstanding. Julian didn't argue. He didn't protest. He didn't deny it. He just looked at me, not angry, not shocked, resigned. Admiral Harrison spoke quietly to him. You were warned. Scarlett shook her head violently. No, this is because of her. She did this. She's jealous. I met her eyes calmly. I don't have to be jealous of something built on theft, I said. My mother pressed a hand to her mouth. My father looked between us like he was trying to rebuild reality in real time. Scarlett's voice trembled now. You humiliated me, in front of everyone. I glanced around the courtyard. I didn't say a word, I replied. And that was true. Admiral Harrison stepped slightly aside to give the officers room. Julian allowed them to take his wrists without resistance. Handcuffs clicked. The sound was small, but final. Scarlett stared at the metal like it had personally betrayed her. You said this world was ours, she whispered to Julian. He didn't answer. Because the world she thought she was marrying into operated on rules she never bothered to understand. My parents remained frozen. My mother finally looked at me and said, barely audible, Why didn't you tell us? I held her gaze. You never asked. Scarlett looked down at her ruined bouquet, then back up at me. Her face had gone completely white. You were never beneath us, she said slowly. No, I replied. Admiral Harrison adjusted his cuffs and looked at me again. Welcome back, General, he said quietly. I nodded once. The ceremony arch still stood behind them. Flowers still arranged, chairs still aligned, but the illusion had collapsed. And this time I hadn't needed to raise my voice to do it. I stepped fully into the aisle once the handcuffs were secured. Not as the sister in the last row, not as the embarrassment, as the ranking officer in charge of the operation. Escort him, I said calmly. The military police didn't hesitate. Julian looked at me one last time. You knew, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. They guided him down the aisle he was supposed to walk as a groom. Guests moved their chairs out of the way. No one spoke now. There was no room left for commentary. Scarlett grabbed his sleeve again. You can't take him like this. This is a wedding, one of the officers answered her evenly. This is a federal matter, she turned on me instead. You planned this. Yes, I said. Her voice broke. To ruin me. No, I corrected. To stop a crime. Admiral Harrison remained still, his face controlled but heavy. He wasn't defending his son. He wasn't defending her. He understood chain of command. Julian was escorted out through the same entrance where the officers had first appeared. The sound of the estate gates closing in the distance carried more weight than any vow ever spoken there. Scarlett stood in the center of the aisle in her wedding gown, breathing unevenly. Her makeup had started to crack at the edges. "This isn't over," she said weakly. "It is for him," I replied. She looked around at the guests, searching for support. No one moved, because this wasn't gossip anymore. It was evidence. I turned to my tablet and tapped the next file. "Scarlett Vance," I said clearly. Her head snapped toward me. "What now?" I walked closer but kept distance between us. "You opened a credit line under my identity," I said evenly. "You forged my signature. You rerouted billing addresses. You attempted to transfer inherited property without legal authority." My father flinched. Scarlett shook her head. "That was family business." "No," I replied. "That was fraud." I held up my tablet so the nearest guest could see. Copies of the application, digital timestamps, IP address linked to her apartment, screenshots of her messages discussing the cabin transfer. "I have already submitted this to federal legal review," I continued calmly. Scarlett's voice dropped. "You wouldn't." "I did." She stepped toward me. "You're my sister." "Yes," I said. "And you stole from me." Her composure finally shattered. She dropped to her knees in the middle of the aisle. The white fabric of her gown spread around her like something collapsing. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean it like that. I just needed help." "I thought you owed me." I looked down at her. "No one is owed theft," I said. She reached for my hand. I didn't offer it. "I'll fix it," she insisted. "I'll pay it back. I'll cancel everything. You already spent it." My mother rushed forward. "Amelia, please. She's your sister. Don't destroy her life." I met her eyes calmly. She tried to destroy mine. My father stepped in front of Scarlett as if he could shield her. "We can settle this privately," he said urgently. "There's no need to escalate." "It's already escalated," I replied. Scarlett's shoulders shook. "You're heartless," I answered evenly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "In the military, we do not tolerate betrayal." The words didn't need volume. They carried on their own. Scarlett's hands dropped to her lap. For the first time in her life, she understood that charm didn't override consequences. I turned to the nearest officer. "Ensure the fraud file proceeds through civilian prosecution channels," I said. "Full documentation attached." "Yes, ma'am," he replied immediately. My parents froze again at the word. "Ma'am." Not sarcastic, not dismissive, official. Scarlett stared at me like she didn't recognize the person in front of her. "You were never beneath me," she whispered. "I was never competing," I replied. Admiral Harrison stepped closer. "This estate is no longer available for private use," he said quietly to the staff. "Clear the grounds." Within minutes, the guests began leaving. No music, no celebration, just controlled exit. Scarlett remained kneeling long after most people had gone. My mother crouched beside her. My father stood a few steps back, defeated. I looked at them all once. "I'll be reclaiming the cabin this week," I said calmly. "The deed remains in my name." My father opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, because he knew they had gambled everything on an illusion and lost. I turned toward the exit. Scarlett's voice followed me, small now. "You can't just walk away from us." I stopped briefly but didn't turn around. "I'm not walking away," I said. "I'm stepping forward." Outside, the air felt different, quieter, cleaner. The estate gates stood open. My truck waited exactly where I had parked it. No escort needed. No announcement. I looked up at the sky for a second before getting in. No fireworks, no dramatic music, just space. For years I had allowed them to define me as small because it kept operations simple. But silence is not weakness, it's strategy. I started the engine. Behind me, a fake empire had collapsed under its own lies. Ahead of me was work, real work, the kind that doesn't require applause. As I drove away from the estate, I didn't feel revenge. I felt clarity. Rank can be hidden, honor cannot. Do you think I was right to cut them off completely, or should blood still matter after betrayal like that? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe integrity should never be optional, subscribe for more stories about justice and strength. I didn't win that day because I was louder. I won because I was prepared. People love dramatic confrontations. They love the moment when someone finally claps back. They think strength looks like shouting, slamming doors, or exposing someone in the middle of a room. That's entertainment. It's not power. When Scarlett mocked my dress, I didn't defend it. When she called me a failure, I didn't correct her. When she seated me in the last row, I didn't argue. When the officiant asked for objections, I stayed silent. That silence wasn't weakness, it was timing. Most people react emotionally when they're attacked. That reaction becomes the attacker's proof. See, she's unstable, she's jealous, she's dramatic. If I had stood up at the bridal fitting and said, "I'm a general," no one would have believed me. It would have looked desperate. If I had shouted during the ceremony, it would have looked like revenge. Instead, I let the facts arrive on their own. Here's what I've learned: when you argue with someone who has already decided who you are, you're not having a debate. You're performing for their ego. Scarlett needed me to react. My parents needed me to apologize. Julian needed me to stay quiet. I chose something different. I gathered evidence. That's the part no one claps for. There is a difference between being silent because you're afraid and being silent because you're building. Fear-based silence avoids conflict. Strategic silence controls conflict. One makes you smaller, the other makes the room wait. If you're dealing with someone who underestimates you, let them. Underestimation creates blind spots. Blind spots create openings. But here's the key: silence without action is just self-neglect. If you stay quiet and do nothing, you're not strategic. You're trapped. While Scarlett was planning centerpieces, I was documenting fraud. While she was mocking my grease-covered hands, I was tracing digital signatures. While she was rehearsing vows, I was coordinating with investigators. That's the difference. Emotion reacts, discipline prepares, and discipline is quiet. A lot of people watching this story might recognize themselves in that last row. Maybe not at a wedding, maybe at a job. Maybe you're the one who works the hardest but gets talked over in meetings. Maybe you're the one in the family who doesn't fit the image. Maybe you're the one who doesn't post your achievements because you don't need validation. And maybe people mistake that for weakness. Let them. But don't confuse letting them underestimate you with accepting mistreatment. If someone crosses a line, document it. If someone manipulates finances, protect yourself legally. If someone disrespects you publicly, respond with position, not noise. There's something powerful about letting the truth arrive without announcement. When Admiral Harrison saluted me, I didn't have to say a word. The room recalibrated on its own. Power revealed at the right time doesn't need defense. Another lesson: not every insult deserves a response, but every pattern deserves attention. Scarlett's behavior wasn't one comment. It was escalation, mocking the dress, blocking the seating, stealing my identity, attempting to take inherited property. If I had exploded at the first insult, I would have missed the bigger crime. Some people provoke you early, so you never see the real damage forming behind the scenes. That's why discipline matters. Not the kind where you suppress your emotions until you break. The kind where you control your response long enough to choose the outcome. Let me be clear about something: staying calm doesn't mean staying passive. I froze the accounts, I filed the documentation, I authorized the arrest. I just didn't narrate it in advance. If you're in a situation where you feel underestimated, ask yourself 2 questions then. Are you staying quiet because you're scared to act too? Or are you staying quiet because you're building leverage? Those are not the same thing. Leverage changes conversations without raising your voice. There's also a dangerous habit people develop when they feel dismissed over explaining. You don't owe everyone access to your resume. You don't owe everyone your credentials. You don't owe everyone proof of your worth. If someone needs to see your title to treat you with respect, they were never respecting you. They were respecting your label. Real confidence doesn't chase recognition. It enforces boundaries, and boundaries are not emotional speeches, they're decisions. Freezing the credit accounts was a boundary. Submitting the fraud documentation was a boundary. Walking away from my family was a boundary. No yelling required. If you're constantly defending yourself, you're exhausted because you're fighting on the wrong battlefield. Stop arguing. Start documenting. Stop reacting. Start preparing. Stop proving. Start positioning. One of the most dangerous things you can be is calm while everyone else is loud, because calm people make calculated moves, and calculated moves don't need applause. You know what really shifted the room that day? It wasn't the handcuffs, it was the salute. Not because it exposed my rank, but because it exposed their assumptions. The people who laughed at me weren't evil. They were comfortable. They had decided what I was worth based on presentation. Presentation is easy to fake. Character is not. So here's the lesson I want you to take with you. You don't have to win every argument. You only have to win the outcome. And outcomes are built in silence long before they show up in public. Have you ever stayed quiet while people assumed you were weak, only to prove them wrong later? I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments, and if you believe strength doesn't need to shout. Subscribe for more stories about discipline, boundaries, and real power. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't about rank. It was about access. For most of my life, I believed family automatically meant loyalty. I believed blood created boundaries that outsiders couldn't cross. I believed if you shared a last name, you shared protection. I was wrong. Family does not mean access to your identity. Family does not mean access to your finances. Family does not mean access to your peace. Scarlett didn't see my social security number as protected information. She saw it as a shared resource. My parents didn't see my inheritance as legal property. They saw it as negotiable. They believed proximity created permission. It doesn't. One of the most dangerous ideas people grow up with is this: their family. They wouldn't hurt me. Sometimes the people who feel most entitled to your life are the ones who feel least accountable for damaging it. Scarlett didn't wake up one day and decide to commit fraud like a stranger would. She did it gradually, first small dismissals, then assumptions, then justification. She owes us. It's temporary. It's just paperwork. It's family business. Notice something about those phrases. None of them include consent. When someone uses guilt to override your boundaries, that's not closeness. That's manipulation. I've seen this pattern outside my family too. People who are responsible, stable, disciplined, they become targets for emotional leverage. You're the reliable one, so you should co-sign. You're the strong one, so you can handle it. You don't have kids, so you don't need the money. You make more, so you should contribute more. Entitlement often hides behind compliments. You're the only one who can help. You're so capable, you don't even need it. What they really mean is, I feel entitled to what you built. Let me give you something practical. There are 3 warning signs when family crosses from connection into exploitation. First, they treat your resources as communal, but their resources as private. Scarlett saw my credit score as available, but her wedding budget was hers. My parents saw my cabin as a gift option, but their house was off limits. Second, they use shame when you say no. The moment I froze the accounts, I wasn't accused of being cautious. I was accused of being jealous, ungrateful, cold. If someone attacks your character instead of addressing the issue, they know they're wrong. Third, they assume forgiveness before asking permission. Scarlett didn't ask if she could use my identity. She assumed that if she got caught, I'd clean it up quietly to avoid embarrassment. That's not trust. That's calculation. Let me say something that might make people uncomfortable. Access is a privilege, not a birthright. Sharing DNA does not automatically grant someone entry into your bank account, your property, or your private information. If someone cannot respect your boundaries when things are calm, they will absolutely violate them when things are desperate. Another important truth cutting someone off is not revenge. It's risk management. When I removed my parents and Scarlett from my life, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fueled by anger. It was a security decision. They had demonstrated they were willing to steal my identity, manipulate legal documents, rewrite narratives publicly, justify criminal behavior as family unity. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern. And patterns predict future behavior. A lot of people stay in unhealthy family dynamics because they confuse guilt with responsibility. You are not responsible for maintaining relationships at the cost of your integrity. You are not required to sacrifice your stability to preserve someone else's image. And you are not obligated to tolerate betrayal because that's just how they are. Let's talk about the financial side for a moment because this part matters in real life. If you have decent credit, monitor it. If you have assets, protect them legally. If you inherit property, confirm the deed is recorded correctly. If a relative asks you to co-sign anything, read every page. If someone says it's just temporary, verify the exit plan. Trust is not a substitute for documentation. Some people think setting boundaries with family makes you harsh. Here's what's actually harsh: cleaning up a financial disaster someone else created in your name. Here's what's actually harsh: watching your work collapse because you didn't want to offend someone. Scarlett believed I wouldn't escalate because it would make the family look bad. She underestimated something important. My loyalty is to principle first. Family that demands silence in the face of wrongdoing is not protecting unity. They're protecting reputation. And reputation built on secrecy always cracks. There's another layer here that people don't talk about enough. Sometimes you outgrow your family, not financially, not socially, ethically. If your standards rise and theirs stay the same, tension will follow. You have two options. Lower your standards to maintain comfort, or maintain your standards and accept distance. I chose distance. It doesn't mean I don't remember where I came from. It means I refuse to let where I came from dictate where I'm going. If someone only values you when you provide something money, influence, stability, that's not love, that's utility. And you are not a utility. You are not a backup plan. You are not an emergency fund. You are not a reputation shield. You are a person with boundaries. The night Scarlett knelt in her wedding dress and begged, it wasn't because she understood the moral failure. It was because she understood the consequences. There's a difference. Consequences teach lessons that conversations never could. If you're watching this and you're struggling with family boundaries, ask yourself this. If this person were not related to you, would you allow this behavior? If the answer is no, then blood is the only thing holding the door open. And blood is not a legal contract. Family should be the safest place in your life. If it's the most dangerous one, you're allowed to close it. Do you believe family should always get unlimited chances? Or is there a point where protecting yourself becomes more important than preserving the relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe boundaries are strength, not cruelty. Subscribe for more stories about discipline, integrity, and self-respect. I didn't wear my uniform to prove who I was. I wore it when the job required it. That's something most people misunderstand about rank. Titles are situational, honor is constant. Scarlett built her identity around appearance, the right venue, the right last name, the right guests, the right image. She believed status was something you entered when the doors opened and the spotlight hit. I learned something different. Status can be borrowed, image can be staged, reputation can be curated, honor cannot. When Admiral Harrison saluted me, it wasn't about exposing my title. It wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was recognition of work done when no one was watching. Most of what I do never shows up on social media. There are no announcement posts, no captions, no applause. Just reports filed correctly, audits completed quietly, decisions made when they're inconvenient. Scarlett wanted a world she could step into and be admired. I built a world where I could stand alone and still be accountable. That's the difference. There's a dangerous obsession in modern culture with being seen, being validated, being publicly acknowledged. But the people who chase visibility often neglect foundation. Let me put it plainly, if your confidence depends on someone else recognizing your title, you don't actually have confidence. You have dependency. Scarlett believed marrying into rank would elevate her. But rank is not contagious. You don't inherit integrity by proximity. You don't gain discipline through marriage. And you don't absorb honor through association. Honor is built in private choices. It's choosing not to steal even when no one would notice. It's refusing shortcuts even when they're convenient. It's saying no when saying yes would benefit you immediately. When I froze the accounts, I could have done it quietly and cleaned up the mess later to keep the peace. That would have protected the image. Instead, I chose transparency. Not for revenge, for integrity. There's something else I want to say clearly. You do not need to advertise your value. If you constantly tell people who you are, you're trying to manage perception. If you consistently live who you are, perception adjusts on its own. I didn't need to correct Scarlett every time she called me a failure. The truth corrected her. People who build their identity on comparison will always need someone beneath them. Scarlett needed me to look small so she could feel large. That's fragile power. Real power doesn't shrink others to survive. It stands on competence. Here's a practical lesson you can apply immediately. Build skills that speak for you when you're not in the room. Develop discipline that doesn't require praise. Create systems in your life that protect you legally, financially, and emotionally. Don't chase environments where you need to prove yourself. Create environments where your work speaks. When everything collapsed at that estate, I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, because none of what happened changed who I was. If the Admiral had never saluted me publicly, my rank would have remained the same. If no one ever discovered what I did for a living, the work would still matter. That's the standard you should aim for. Ask yourself this: if no one ever praised you for your effort, would you still do the right thing? If no one knew your title, would you still carry yourself with integrity? If your image disappeared tomorrow, would your character survive? Scarlett's empire fell because it relied on borrowed weight, expensive venues, inherited connections, credit she didn't earn, status she didn't build. When pressure hit, it collapsed. Character built slowly doesn't collapse quickly. Another truth: don't confuse being underestimated with being disrespected. Being underestimated can work in your favor. Being disrespected repeatedly without response becomes a pattern. The key is knowing when to reveal and when to remain unseen. I remained unseen until it served the mission to step forward. That wasn't ego, that was timing. A lot of people think strength is loud. It isn't. Strength is consistent. It shows up when it's inconvenient. It follows rules even when shortcuts are tempting. It holds standards even when no one else does. And here's something I wish more people understood. You don't have to destroy someone to prove your worth. You just have to stand firm when tested. Scarlett destroyed her own illusion by believing presentation was substance. I simply refused to participate in it. There's peace in knowing who you are without needing the room to confirm it. There's stability in building something no one can take from you. Rank can be reassigned. Wealth can disappear. Reputation can be attacked. Honor stays. That's why I didn't leave that estate feeling angry. I left feeling free. Free from pretending. Free from explaining. Free from shrinking. If you're building your life right now, focus on what remains when everything external is stripped away. Your skill. Your discipline. Your word. Because when titles fade and rooms empty, that's what stands. Rank can be hidden. Honor cannot. If everything you've built disappeared tomorrow, would your character still stand? Share your answer in the comments. And if you believe integrity is more valuable than image, subscribe for more stories about strength that doesn't need a spotlight.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.